Hey, what a beautiful day it is on the Sunshine Coast. Beautiful, sunny and warm, and a great day to fit this pod filter kit to this 1.8 litre turbocharged Volkswagen Beetle. The first process of this installation is to remove the airbox, and you'll see there's a bolt here and down below we've removed the bolt down here. So I'll just remove this to begin with and we'll take the airbox out. Just take that spring clamp and take it out. It's easy to take it out. You can remove the battery to make a bit more space, but we're not going to do that today. Airbox. The contents of the pod filter kit, obviously the pod filter and clamp, flange, mounting bracket, associated hardware, clamps and brackets, even the oil for oiling the filter in future times. It does come pre-oiled, so let's get into it. So we need to remove the MAF sensor from the airbox. Just a couple of screws. One's a Torx and one's a Phillips head. I don't know why that is. They're probably supposed to be both Phillips, I'd say, or both Torx. Pull it out. There we go. So that's the MAF sensor. Obviously the flange needs to be mounted to this. Oh, it looks like a tight fit. A bit tighter than I want it to be. It's on very tight. It's not going to come off in a hurry, that's for sure. One of the gearbox mount bolts has to be removed in order to fit the bracket. That's an 18mm head. I'm expecting it'll be pretty tight. They normally are, so I'm using an L-bar. And out it comes. Should be finger tight now, which it is. Out it comes. Because we're only removing one, it doesn't really affect anything. The gearbox is still held in place. On the bracket, sandwiching the bracket with a washer on the head and thread side of the bolt. Put that back in. And at this stage, we're just going to leave that finger tight so we can manipulate the bracket. Instructions for the kit are pretty poor. It doesn't really give an exploded view, but I would say that the rubber mount sits on the bracket side to stop any possible chance of vibration between the bracket and the clamp. And then it says also to install this to the bracket prior to putting it into the car, which just makes it cumbersome, so we're going to do it now. Oops. Okay. Position the bracket, the mounting bracket, central to the intake. Okay, so if we get that right, and between the pivot point down here and also the pivot point up here, we can get it pretty well right. So we'll sit it, I reckon, about there, and we'll tighten it up. Need an Allen key. I think it's a 5mm Allen key and a 10mm spanner. Don't be too alarmed. You can see the bracket pivoting a little bit. Don't be too alarmed by that. Remember, it does have that rubber mount. It also has a nylock nut, which means that even though we're not going to tighten it absolutely extremely tight, just tighten it to that point, we should still be able to pivot it, which we can. You see that pivot? And the nylock nut will ensure that the nut does not come off, which is what we want. So that's about central there. Fantastic, ready for the next piece. Basically what's supposed to happen is this is supposed to clamp around the intake and the MAF sensor. Once it's there, that clamp then secures it all in place. So we'll get that ready and we'll get back in a sec. So what I've done is I've forced this clamp onto the bracket, ready for MAF sensor mounting. Probably remember that spring clamp we removed earlier. Obviously that's replaced now by a threaded hose clamp. What I'm going to do is tighten this clamp so that it's close to the mark. The instructions, like I said, from K&N are pretty ordinary. A lot of people use screwdrivers for this type of thing. I never have. I like to use a socket. It's much more direct. You can get a bit of tightness on it. Don't over tighten the clamp though. That's the only thing that can happen. Alright, we'll get it close to the mark and then we'll position it. Already that's quite secure and we haven't even tightened the bottom bracket yet. Being a bit of a perfectionist, I'm going to move this clamp a little more central just here, so I'm going to get that done right now. I ended up positioning the clamp a little bit more forward so we sit on the flange and not the back edge. If you sit on the back edge of this bracket, you could imagine you make a taper and there's a possible chance that this will slip forward, where at the moment it's really nice and tight and it's tightened over that flange area. That's good. Connect the MAF sensor back up. So we tighten this, we've tightened that, it's all secure, it's in its natural position. It's very important that it's in its natural position. If it's not in its designed position, of course you're going to load up the intake hose, possibly tear it, so we don't want to do that. The clamp's a little tight, so I'm just loosening that. Again, that's an 8mm socket, this one was a 7. That should fit fairly snug on the flange. Alright, we have that in position. Time to tighten it up. Don't over tighten it, it's not necessary, but of course make sure it's firm. The last thing you want is your pod filter falling off and then sucking in a heap of dirt. The next fun part of this installation is removing this elbow from the ventilation, crankcase ventilation pipe. I'm suggesting that you probably think about using a heat gun because there's no way known that that's going to come out unless we heat it. Okay, we've removed the elbow. Oh, look, a nice shiny K&N top. The clamp on. And just slide it in. All of their clamps are huge, too big. And is it a 1/4 inch? It's 1/4 inch on this one. Everything's different in this kit. We had an 8mm. A 7mm clamp and now a 1/4 inch. Alright, so it's quite tight now. You're not going to believe this, but K&N actually suggests clamping it to the battery terminal, and we probably can. I don't like clamping things to the battery terminal if you can help it, but I've just finished tightening it. So whilst we could mount it there, not advisable because you'll get rubbing between the two, and of course that will end up wearing through. Same as if we put it on that pipe there. So I guess in this situation the battery positive battery lead is best location for it. You'll still have a bit of flex in the hose, and when the engine's moving that can compensate for that flex, so let's put it there. And the longest zip tie in the world. There you have it. That's the K&N pod filter installation kit, 1.8 litre turbo Beetle. This is a 2001 model, but of course it fits all of the 1.8 litre turbo models. There's the crankcase breather that we attached. Double check your work, make sure everything's secure. Everything's tight, so there's no possible chance of any mishaps. It looks good. It'll look better when the battery cover's on. We just need a little bit more repair here because Volkswagen poorly designed electrics, particularly in these models, and some of the, I believe, Jetta and Golfs have a similar type of problem with heating up due to connections and incorrect wire size from factory and all this type of thing. Anyway, that's it. We'll get some sounds for you. First observations are that it does have a little bit more response. It is more responsive, despite claims that it doesn't increase the airflow. It must a little bit, but you can hear it. Hear it drafting. And of course you can hear the blow-off valve. So we're pretty happy. I think it's a good installation. If you wanted to increase performance slightly, it's not a big increase, but it does increase it a little bit. Well, consider a pod filter kit. So after a quick drive, make sure that everything looks right. Okay, that's all good. Still nice and tight. Everything's secure, and job completed.